today we're going to have a little intro into expressions and building a custom tool to be able to manipulate an image in a way sort of similar to this. This is going to be pretty much not a step-by-step how-to guide. It's going to be a more informational guide on how to build similar things like this and how different parameters work in conjunction with one another. Okay, so here is pretty much my project. Just wanted to go through what I have set up and then we'll dive into how it's built. So I have just a custom tool here, and I have a media in that then gets fed into 4 foregrounds of an image, and we have a background that's transparent. And each one of these is just a little quadrant represented by our mask. And we add here, we have another one, here we have another one, here we have another one to make the whole picture. And then just to make this look really cool, in each one of my merges, I have the edges mirrored. So once they go past the visible range, it just mirrors itself. So that's how you get that cool effect. But for now, so that you can understand how everything works, I'm just going to turn all of these to canvas so you can see the edges when I get to them. Makes it a little easier to understand how this is all built. Okay, so in our little custom tool that drives all of these merges and also the masks, the first one here we have out in from left to right. So the left and right sides are controlled. And if we want to take the left and right sides and move them in, they go in. If we want to move them out, they go out, right? For the whole image. The same exact thing here for top and bottom, in and out. As well as for this one is the down and up for the left side. So we go up and we go down, right? And as well for the right side, up and down. And we'll get back to that because these two are actually a little bit different, and I'll explain that. And then for here, we have a spin, which is just kind of like, it's hard to explain, but if I want it to make it seem like it's sort of spinning, it's kind of going clockwise if you had to move something sort of clockwise. And then here we have the same exact thing, but we're also manipulating the masks. So when we do that, we have an effect that's sort of like that. So cool thing about this is we can go through here and we can keyframe all of these and end up getting a really cool effect. We could also come into each one of our merges, or excuse me, our masks, and manipulate how they look. So we could do something like that, and we could take, let's say, the background, or make the background the image so you can't actually see those seams. And then when we come into here, we could get some like really weird looking stuff like this, right? So obviously this would start to look really weird when you have like a moving image, and you know, you could start to really build some like really cool looking effects here. Okay, so how is all of this being driven? Let me reset these quick. So as you can see in here, obviously there's an expression, and the expression is what drives these. So our custom tool, let's open up a custom tool quick. So to open up this select tool, if you've never done it before, it's just shift and spacebar, and then you just type in whatever tool you want. And then once it's in there, you can just hit enter. So our custom tool has a whole bunch of different parameters in here. We're just going to stick to this first page, and we're only actually going to be doing the number in parameters. The other ones we can dive into at another time if this is something that people are interested in. But so pretty much all these is it's just a location to hold a value. So you just move these and there's a value that spits in there, right? That's all that is. And as you can see over here, it's the same thing. What you'll notice is here I have names here, and you can do the same thing here. You have to remember that these are only labels for the tool. It's not a like a call value. You're not going to use that to call to do a lookup for a value. So to change these, you just come over, which one is it? In here, this final one, and then you can just come into number controls, and then you can just type in here. So I could just put an A in here, and now the first one will now have an A, right? And if you didn't want things on, so we don't want all of these points on, we can close those, and we don't need the LUT control or any of that. We can dive into all of these at a later date. But so this is pretty much the same thing that I have over here, obviously a couple less and with some labels on there. So that's pretty much the first tool. So to call these different values in here, there is a very simple way to remember this. It's first whatever the node name is, and then whatever that value is. And this is something that you can use throughout all of Fusion. You can call any type of value from pretty much any node. When I'm using the ellipse tool and I want to create a perfect circle. So in the ellipse tool itself, I normally, when I'm showing you guys different tutorials, I say go into expressions and drag down to the height. So all this is doing is it's just grabbing the height within that tool, because there's no period to look up in another tool. So it just looks within that tool. So because this is just saying, okay, this value is whatever height equals, and height equals is 0.5, so that's why this is 0.5. When I move it, obviously it's going to have that. If I was to change this to C dot number in 1, or actually let's go over to the other tool to make this make more sense. So we had custom tool 1 number in 1, and we call that value. Now in our custom tool 1, that's our name of our tool. Remember, we changed the A to a 1. So now if I change this, it's going to change that value for this ellipse tool here. So hopefully this is starting to make sense a little bit, how we're pulling a value from another tool. But you can do this with just about any value field that you see. And there's 3 primary fields. You have text, which is just any kind of character. And then you have a number field, which is just your numeric value, which can also be decimal points. And then you have a point. And for 2D, obviously, you only have 2 axes. So it's an X and a Y. And then 3D space, obviously you have Z. That was that other, if you come into here, the point in, and you have the 2 values, you can also manipulate that. So coming back to our project here, if we come into here, we are manipulating, obviously it looks like 2 sets. So it's pretty much this first one and the second one, we're manipulating them. The way in which that we're manipulating them, let's get a merge in here, is a merge affect the tool set within a merge affects the foreground image. So if we take this background here that's transparent and we bring that in here, and then we bring the image that we've been working on, we view this, all of these parameters are going to state how to add this foreground to this background. So we can say, okay, we want to bring it in at 28 degrees, whatever, zoom it in, whatever it is. And that's pretty much how we are controlling all of these here with a value here. And we're only working within the center, and we'll get into it a bit more. And then on top of that, we have a region in which that image is applied. So if I was to take, let's say, a ellipse tool and bring that in here, now this is saying this merge is going to bring in this image within the boundaries of this ellipse tool. And then we're going to manipulate the foreground with whatever these parameters are, right? But they have to stay within the boundaries of here. That's why when you seen I zoomed, it didn't make this ellipse tool bigger. You would actually have to come into here and make that bigger to change that sizing. Okay. So hopefully it's kind of like starting to connect. So now if we take a look at this again, we obviously we're saying that this top one here and then this last one here, we're now just pushing their images down, right? And then the bottom two, we're pushing them up. So all we would have to do is we have to say, okay, this value for two of them, we feed it to the Y as a positive value. And then for the other two, we feed it as a negative value. The ones I clicked on were backwards. This one's adding obviously to it, and then this one is a negative value. And then I took it a step further, because if you take a look at how these two work, if you look at this, they look like they're pretty much doing the same thing, except for while I'm moving it, you can see that little bit of a gap. But for the most part, these look like they're doing the same thing till I do this. Then you realize that this is keeping the same line here, but this one, its line's moving even though these are going back and forth. So this center line never moves even though I move this. So it's like, how are you doing that? It's pretty much the same way I'm doing it before. These two, their mask for this one parameter doesn't ever move. So if we take a look at this, that mask never moves anytime I do that, right? But if I take a look at this mask, when I move this one, it's moving. So it's like little things like that. You can take a little bit of data from one and put it in another one, and then it's just, taking one value and flipping it negative. And the same thing with how the spin works. Obviously, none of the masks move, but the images move. And then if I do this one, the images are moving and the masks are also moving. So you can start to really, add these in and get all different cool effects. When you're building these, it takes a little bit of effort till you wrap your head around how, the problem solve on how to do it. So I have an Excel sheet here explaining each value. And let's go into a merge, and we'll bring this over and bring this in. Oh, well, great, fantastic. So the value in which we're changing, as you can see here, it's within this center point. If I come in here though, what you'll notice is that it has a point value, just like how we've seen with that custom tool, but there's two values here. So one obviously represents the X and one represents the Y. And just like we were doing before, what I can do in here, instead of taking all of this out and putting like custom tool one dot number in one, instead of doing that, because obviously you'll get an error because that is just one value, even though you have two fields. What you would do is you would say, okay, for the X, because the X is going to come first, you would put custom tool one number in one. And what you'll end up getting is, obviously I left this as 0.5, and for this value, it's pulling whatever is in here, which is 725, If I click this, it's going to be 0. So in here, to have this default as 0, all I would put in here is plus 0.5. So now this would be 0.5 right here. And then when you move this, let's actually view this. When we move this, now it goes like that, and you go to 0, it's just like that. So that's kind of how I was adding these values into each one. Now, if we take a look in here, we have, obviously, this is the call for this is C. So we have C number in 1 plus C number in 5 plus C number in 6 plus 0.5. And I didn't just go in and write all of these and have it, work. What I did is I just went through each one and I said, okay, this first slider here, I want them, the left and rights, to go in. So I said, okay, for here, or for this first one, I need to have the values go this way. So I just looked in here. Let me remove this. And I said, okay, I need the values to go this way. So it goes up, right? So my custom tool, when I move it that way, it goes up. So I could just take that value, and that first one, I can just add it to my 0.5. So I just added it to the 0.5. And then when I got over to this side, they need to go negative. So all I had to do is just take my number and then times it by -1 to get the opposite, so if it's positive, it's negative, if it's negative, it's positive, obviously, to go the other way. And then you just start to add on to that. So I was like, okay, for this first one, we're gonna go positive. For the second one, we're gonna go positive. For this one, we're gonna go negative. For this one, we're gonna go negative, right? So that's the first one. That's how we ran that. And then I was like, okay, then for the next one, I just needed to do the same thing, but then this first one, and then this one over here, they're gonna go down, and the other ones are gonna go up. So I need to see which way goes up and which way goes down. And to know how this works, over here, this corner is 0, 0, and this top corner is 1, 1. So then you know that down here, this whole line is negative on the Y, and going up, it's positive. For this side, it's negative. Going across this way, it's positive for the X, back and forth. So then you just start to add them. And then I got kind of like clever, because if you see this one, it goes up, right? And if I move these, if I move them like this, you'll see that my seam is now up here and this seam is still in the middle. So what I ended up doing is I said, you know what? I want to get clever now. I want to do that same exact thing. So my left side, this portion goes up and this portion goes up. But then on top of that, if you take a look here, I'm also going to add in the mask to move with the image. So that's why we now have that that going up. And then we have our seam way up here, where this seam's still down here. So that's what I did there. And the same thing with the spin. So I wanted them to move in such a fashion that they would, do this weird effect. So I just have the masks moving with them. So it's just, problem solving. But then you can just add all of your numbers together. And this doesn't get very difficult to do. It's just that if you have any type of like calculations that you, so for like, let's say this side here, right? What I want to do is I don't want to say number in 6 times -1 plus 7.5. What I want to do is I want to get this whole value and then have that whole value be represented here, whatever this equals to, have it represented here, and then plus that by 0.75. to get, you know, its position. So, and the reason why you do that is because when you start to add things in, you can start to add more math, and you don't want to have things be multiplying each other if you're just trying to get one value. Hopefully I'm connecting dots here. When I was like working on this, I was like, this is going to be very difficult to explain, but hopefully, you know, you can start to connect the dots on these different things. And you have to remember, this is just a movement. This isn't very much, right? It's kind of like a cool effect because you can make something cool out of this. And especially when you come into each one of these and you do like a mirror, because when you come into this, it's just going to mirror the edges. And then you can get really cool effects where you can just keep spinning these and keep going and going and going, right? You can get really cool effects like that, but there's so much more. You know, think of all the tools that exist. Like if you come into the tools, all of these different effects, you could just start to mash them all together and get them to do all sorts of different things. I was actually thinking of making like a really cool tool set that it would just be, all you have to do is just have a media in go into something, and it would be a couple sliders that would do like really cool effects. But yeah, I mean, there's like a ton of different things that you can do with this. It's just very hard to make a guide around building something like this because, let's be honest, this is a very like simple math. It looks kind of complicated because you're just taking a number, and like for this case, I didn't want the positive number, so I times it by -1 to get a negative value, and then this one the same thing, and then this one the same thing, right? And then you do it to 0.5 to have it as centered. Like these things seem a little complicated, but once you can start to build them, they're not very complicated. But like, yeah, I'm struggling to figure out a way to build these to have them make sense and easy to follow. So I'm not exactly sure. You guys let me know if like there's some like really cool effects, if I should just make, you know, tutorials on how to make different effects or make a bundle. I don't really know. It just, I had questions to make like a tutorial about different expressions and stuff, and there's a ton of different like calls you can make to different like math functions and stuff like that. But if you don't even know the basics of how to move a value from one parameter to another parameter and then have those values be manipulated in such a way to make like an effect, then telling you all the different ways to do different math functions would just be like over a lot of people's heads. So this is going to be like a thing that you guys just have to tell me, like, I didn't understand this, like, do a step by step. Maybe it's easier to follow. Like I said, I don't really, I feel I sound like a broken record at this point, but hopefully, you know, this kind of makes a little bit of sense on how to be able to manipulate different things. Like once you start going, you know, you get going. Because I was like, oh, you know, I'm doing all of these the same. I was like, you know what? This one, instead of having it move the mask, let's not have it move the mask. And then you can do like weird things like that. And then you can have them go like that as well. And remember, you can take all of these and keyframe them and do like keyframe loops and set them here. And then I just came in and I was at frame 0. I keyframe both of these. I come up to like frame 15 and I move them a little bit, right? Come into here, show select it, and I go like this and I ease them, right? I could right click, set loop, ping pong, come into this one, ease it, right click, oops, ping pong, and then I play it, and we got like some like really cool effect, right? And then I could start to manipulate different things where I start to rotate them and, you know, getting them to do all sorts of weird shit. But yeah, I don't know. Let me know, guys. Like, what would be cool? And then if you wanted to, you could take this and you can make this the background. So then it's just like you have weird pieces moving. And if you want it to get really weird, you can come in here and make a merge and have these two go into a merge and go like this. And then you could rotate this 90. Like I said, this is going to be completely up to you guys. I know you guys want it more on the expressions, but I'm not sure how basic to get. Like I said, let me know in the comments. But with that being said, my name's JR. Thanks for watching.